The notification sound from my banking app has never bothered me before. It's just a sound, the same small chime I've heard 100 times standing in line at the grocery store, or sitting in a meeting, or waiting for coffee to brew. But the chime that went off while I was dragging my suitcase through the Atlanta airport on a Tuesday afternoon in October changed everything about the way I hear that sound now. I almost didn't check it. I was exhausted. 3 weeks in Chicago for a pharmaceutical licensing conference had wrung me completely dry, and all I wanted was to get home, take off my shoes, and sleep for 12 hours in my own bed. The conference had been good, better than good, actually. I'd been selected as one of 40 pharmacists nationwide to present a research case study, which meant that for 3 weeks I was surrounded by people who took me seriously, who asked smart questions, who treated my work like it mattered. I kept thinking, on the flight home, that I needed to hold on to that feeling, that warm, solid sense of being exactly where I was supposed to be. So when my phone chimed, I almost let it go. Almost. I pulled it out of my coat pocket and opened the banking app out of habit, the same way you check email when you're trying not to automatically, without deciding to. The balance on my savings account read $312.47. I stopped walking. Someone bumped into me from behind and muttered something irritated, and I barely registered it. I stood in the middle of the terminal with my suitcase handle still in my hand and read the number again, $312.47. I pressed into the transaction history with fingers that had gone slightly numb. October 14th. A transfer of $52,688 to an external account. Authorized through online banking. Account holder access confirmed. The date meant I'd been in Chicago for 11 days when it happened. 11 days away from home, presenting at panels and taking notes in seminars and eating room service pasta alone in a hotel that smelled like carpet cleaner, while $52,000 I had spent 6 years building disappeared from my account in a single afternoon. I sat down on a bench near the gate and made myself breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way my therapist taught me back in my mid-20s when my anxiety used to swallow entire days. I counted backward from 10. I looked at the transaction number and the external account routing code, and I thought about all the people in my life who knew my online banking password. There was only one answer. Let me tell you something about my parents that you need to understand before the rest of this story makes sense. They are not cruel people. That's the thing that makes all of this so complicated and so hard to explain to anyone who didn't grow up in my house. They are warm and funny, and my mother makes the best sweet potato pie you will ever eat in your life. My father coached my little league softball team for 4 years, and never once made me feel embarrassed about being the slowest runner on the field. There is genuine love in my family. I want to be clear about that because what they did to me is not something that cruel people do. It is something that people do when they love one child a little more than the other, and have never once been asked to examine that. My sister is 4 years younger than me. She is charismatic and beautiful and has been the center of every room she's ever walked into since approximately age 7. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who got straight A's and didn't need much attention, and would be fine no matter what. My sister was the one who needed things, needed help with homework, needed rides to practice, needed someone to talk to at 2 in the morning, needed money for rent when she was 22 and then 24, and then 26 and then again at 28. The family account I'd been keeping in my head, the tally of loans that were called gifts, the birthdays where her present cost twice mine, the college tuition my parents paid in full for her while I took out loans. They said they couldn't afford. That account had been growing for a long time. I never spoke it out loud. I was the one who would be fine. When I was 23, still in school and working 30 hours a week at a compounding pharmacy, I opened a savings account and started putting money in it every single month without fail. I had a goal, enough for a 20% down payment on a house, a real house, not an apartment, something with a yard where I could grow tomatoes and have a dog and not hear my upstairs neighbor's television through the ceiling. It took me 6 years. 6 years of skipping vacations and driving a car with a dent in the passenger door and packing lunch every single day. $52,688. I had been 3 weeks away from calling a real estate agent. I called my mother from the airport bench. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was expecting me to call. I have thought about that detail many times since. "Hey, sweetheart," she said. "How was your flight?" "Mom," I said. "What happened to my savings account?" There was a pause. Not a long one. She had clearly rehearsed this. We need to talk about that when you get home, she said. Tell me now. Another pause. Then, your sister needed it. The salon was going to close, and she had a payment due on the lease and on the equipment, and there were a lot of things stacking up, and your father and I didn't have enough, and you had that account sitting there. You transferred $52,000 out of my personal savings account, I said. My voice was very flat. I noticed that about myself, the flatness of it, like I had gotten very far away from my own body, without asking me. We knew you'd say no, my mother said, and I think she meant it as an explanation. I think she genuinely did not understand that she had just described a crime. You knew I'd say no, I repeated. You always say no when it comes to your sister. You've never been willing to. Stop talking, I said. She stopped. I'll be home in 4 hours, I said. Do not contact me before then. I hung up and sat in the Atlanta airport for a long time, watching planes taxi slowly across the tarmac outside the window, and I thought very carefully about what I was going to do next. Because here is the thing about discovering that someone has stolen from you. Your first instinct is to explode, to call the police and scream and cry and burn every bridge available. And I want to tell you that I understand why people do that. I understand the impulse completely, but I had spent 6 years learning discipline, and I was not going to spend my anger on something that felt good for 10 minutes. I wanted every single dollar back. So I took out my phone, and I opened a notes app, and I started writing things down. My parents had access to my savings account because of a joint account I had opened with them when I was 17, to make it easier for them to deposit my allowance. I had simply never removed them. That was my mistake, and I owned it. But ownership of a joint account does not give either party the right to transfer funds for their own purposes without consent, especially not to a third party, especially not $52,000. I knew this not because I'm a lawyer, but because I had Googled it within 90 seconds of hanging up the phone, and the results were unambiguous. What my parents had done was, depending on the state and the circumstance, potentially civil fraud or theft by misappropriation. The fact that they had access to the account did not make the transfer legal. Intent matters. Purpose matters. I also knew something else, which is that I did not immediately want to call the police on my own parents. I want to be honest about that. Not because I was protecting them, I was not feeling protective of anyone in that moment, but because a police report creates a record that becomes its own kind of chaos, and I had a very specific outcome I wanted, which was my money back. Not my parents arrested, not my sister charged, my money back, and a change in the dynamic that had been operating in my family for my entire adult life. I needed leverage, not drama. When I got home that evening, my parents were sitting in my living room. My sister was not there. My mother had been crying. My father was doing the thing he does when he's uncomfortable, which is sit with his hands folded on his knees and look at a fixed point on the wall. I put my suitcase down by the door and I sat in the armchair across from them and I said, very calmly, tell me everything. They told me. The salon had been struggling for over a year. My sister had taken out a small business loan 18 months ago, and the interest payments had been eating her alive, and she'd missed 2 lease payments on the space, and the equipment she'd financed was about to be repossessed. My parents had tried to help with what they had, which wasn't enough, and then my mother had thought of my savings account, and my father had agreed, and they had used the login credentials I had never changed my childhood pet's name and my birthday, a password I had given them myself at 17, and simply never updated to initiate the transfer. We were going to tell you when you got back, my father said, which was the first thing he'd said since I sat down. When were you going to pay it back? I asked. They looked at each other. We didn't, my mother started. There wasn't a plan, my father finished. I nodded slowly. So you took my down payment for a house, I said. The money I saved for 6 years. You gave it to my sister's business without asking me, without a plan to repay it, and your expectation was that I would just absorb this. You've always been so much better with money than she is, my mother said, and I think she meant it as a compliment. I need you both to leave, I said. Honey, right now, I said. I need you to leave my apartment, and I need you to tell my sister to expect a call from me in the next 24 hours. Not from you, from me. They left. My mother was crying again. My father put his hand briefly on my shoulder on the way out, and I let him, because some part of me needed that to mean something, even in that moment. I sat alone in my apartment for a long time after the door closed, and then I picked up my phone and called my best friend, who is a paralegal, and I told her everything. She was silent for a moment when I finished. Then she said, "You know you could file a police report." "I know," I said. "You should file a police report." "I know," I said again. "But I want them to pay me back first. I want to give them the chance to fix this themselves before I make it criminal." "Why?" she asked. And her voice was gentle, not challenging. I thought about it. Because if I hand this to the police, I get a case number and maybe eventual restitution and years of court dates and my parents with records. If I handle it myself first, I get to decide exactly what accountability looks like, and I want to be the one deciding that. She was quiet for a moment. "How long are you giving them?" 10 days, I said. And then I start making calls. I called my sister the next morning. She picked up and immediately started apologizing. The kind of fast, layered apologies that she's always been good at. The kind that are so elaborate they almost distract you from the fact that she hasn't offered anything concrete. I let her finish. Then I said, "I need you to tell me what you still have." She went quiet. "The salon equipment," I said. "The lease, the business bank account, any personal savings. I need a full picture." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to figure out how you're paying me back," I said. "All of it, every dollar." "I don't have $52,000, she said, and her voice had shifted into something more careful, the way it does when she's calculating. "No," I agreed, "but you have something, and Mom and Dad have something, and collectively, the three of you are going to figure out how to return what you took from me, or I am going to file a police report for theft and let that process play out." The silence on the other end of the line was a different kind of silence than the one my mother had given me at the airport. This one had weight to it. "You would do that?" she said. "To your own parents?" "They did this to their own daughter," I said. "So yes." I gave them 10 days. During those 10 days, I did several things simultaneously. I documented everything: the transfer records, the timestamps, the account access logs, the external account the money went to, which was my sister's business account. I had a consultation with an actual attorney, not just my paralegal friend, who confirmed what I already knew. I had a strong civil case for recovery of funds and potentially a criminal complaint if I chose to pursue it. I also, very quietly, froze the joint account so no further transactions could be made. And I sent my parents and my sister a formal letter, not an email, a letter itemizing the amount owed, the interest I would be applying for every month it went unrepaid, at a rate consistent with a personal loan, and the timeline after which I would be initiating legal proceedings. My mother called me 6 times in those 10 days. I let 4 of them go to voicemail. The 2 I answered were short. I was not mean. I was not cold, exactly, but I was finished being the daughter who absorbs things quietly and makes it easier for everyone else to move on. On day 7, my father came to my apartment alone. He stood in my doorway with his hands in his pockets, and he looked older than I had ever seen him look, and he said, "I need you to know that I know we were wrong. Not just that we made a mistake, that we were wrong." I looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," I said. "That doesn't fix it," he said. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." He had brought a cashier's check for $18,000, which represented essentially everything liquid they had in their own accounts. "It's not all of it," he said, "but it's what we can do right now. Your sister is working on the rest." I took the check. I told him to tell my sister I expected a payment plan in writing within 48 hours, structured the same way any personal loan would be, with a repayment schedule and a consequence clause if she defaulted. He nodded. He turned to leave, and then he turned back. "Are you ever going to forgive us?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "Ask me after you've paid me back." My sister sent the payment plan 2 days later. It wasn't perfect, the timeline was longer than I wanted, and the monthly amounts were lower than they should have been, but my attorney reviewed it and said it was enforceable, and I countered twice before we landed on terms I could accept. She would pay me back the remaining $34,000 over 22 months, with a clause that if she missed 2 consecutive payments, the full remaining balance became immediately due, and I retained the right to take civil action. She signed it. I had it notarized. And then November arrived, and with it, Thanksgiving. My family does Thanksgiving the way a lot of families do. Everyone descends on my parents' house, aunts and uncles and cousins and my grandmother who is 81 and still has opinions about everything. It is normally my favorite holiday. The food is extraordinary, and there's enough noise that you can disappear into a corner with a cousin you actually like and talk for 3 hours, and no one notices. This year, my aunt and uncle came up from Savannah, and my cousin brought her boyfriend for the first time, and my grandmother sat at the head of the table looking pleased with herself, which she always does. I came. I had thought about not coming, but I had decided, very deliberately, that I was not going to be the person who disappeared, and let everyone draw their own conclusions about why. I was going to be there, fully present, the way I had always been. Dinner was fine. Better than fine. Actually, the food was perfect, and my grandmother made everyone go around the table and say something they were grateful for, and when it got to me I said, without any particular emphasis, that I was grateful for the lesson that clarity is more valuable than comfort, and let that land however it was going to land. It was after dinner, when the dishes were being cleared and people were drifting into the living room, that my sister made a choice I did not expect. She was standing with my aunt near the fireplace, and she had been drinking wine for most of the evening, and she said, loudly enough for several people to hear, that she thought it was unfair how things had been handled, that she'd been put in an impossible position, that some people in the family acted like they were better than everyone else and used money as a weapon. The room shifted. My aunt looked uncomfortable. My uncle studied his dessert plate. My grandmother's eyebrows went up about half an inch, which, if you know my grandmother, is the equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. I put down my coffee cup and I said, very calmly and very clearly, "Would you like to explain that to everyone here? Because I'm happy to give them the full picture." My sister looked at me. "You took $52,000 from my savings account without asking me while I was out of town," I said. "Money I saved for 6 years for a house. You and Mom and Dad transferred it to your business account using a login you had no authorization to use for that purpose. I have documentation of the transfer, the account access, and the date. And rather than calling the police, which is what my attorney advised me to do, I gave you the chance to pay me back, which you are doing. On a signed, notarized repayment schedule." The room was very quiet. "So if you'd like to talk about this," I said, "let's talk about it. I have no problem with everyone here knowing exactly what happened." My sister opened her mouth and closed it again. My mother had gone the color of ash. My father was staring at his hands. My grandmother said, from the head of the table, in the voice she has always used when she's about to end a discussion, "I think we all know what happened." That was all she said. But she looked at my sister when she said it, not at me. December came and went. January. My sister made her first 3 payments on time, which surprised me more than I wanted to admit. My parents and I have spoken not warmly, not yet, but honestly, which is more than we managed for most of my adult life. My mother said, in February, that she hadn't understood until that Thanksgiving that there was a tally, that she had genuinely not seen, or not let herself see, the pattern of what my sister had been given and what I had not been given. I didn't tell her that I had been keeping that tally for 15 years. Some things you don't need to say out loud. I made an offer on a house in March. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a kitchen with actual counter space, in a neighborhood where the streets have trees overhanging them, and you can hear birds in the morning. The offer was accepted. The closing was on a Thursday, and I drove to the title office alone, and I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before going in. There is a particular quality to the silence when you have done something that took years. Not loud, not dramatic, just very still. I sat in that parking lot, and I thought about the airport bench in Atlanta, where I first saw the number $312.47, and I thought about the 6 years of packed lunches and skipped trips and the exact feeling of watching that balance grow by $100 at a time, and I thought about all the versions of this moment I had imagined when it seemed very far away. Then I went in and signed my name on the line that made the house mine. I have thought a lot about what I learned from this, and the thing I keep coming back to is this. The damage that gets done in families is almost never dramatic. It doesn't usually announce itself. It accumulates in the quiet moments when someone decides you can handle it, that you'll be fine, that you don't need what they're giving someone else. It builds up over years in the spaces between things that are said and things that aren't. And the only way it ends is when someone decides to stop absorbing it, not out of cruelty, not to punish anyone, but because you finally love yourself enough to say that what was taken from you has a real value, and you intend to get it back. I do not have a perfect relationship with my family. I don't think I ever will, in the way that word usually means. But I have something I did not have before, which is a relationship built on honesty, where they know, without any ambiguity, exactly where I stand, and exactly what I will do if a line is crossed again. That is not nothing. In some families, that is everything. My sister has 11 payments left on the repayment plan. She has not missed one. I don't know what that means yet, whether it means she's changed, or whether it means she's smart enough to know the consequence of defaulting, or some combination of both. People are complicated. I have stopped expecting simple answers about the people I love. What I know is this: I have a house with a yard, and a kitchen with counter space, paid for with money I saved by myself over 6 years, every dollar of which has been returned to me. I have a dog, a ridiculous, enormous, deeply stupid golden retriever named Biscuit, who has already eaten one couch cushion and shows no remorse about it. I have a job I am good at, and a best friend who answers the phone at midnight, and a grandmother who, at 81, looked at the right person when she needed to end a conversation. On weekend mornings, I make coffee and take it out to the backyard and stand in the grass while Biscuit investigates the fence line with the focused seriousness of a professional, and the sun comes through the trees at an angle that makes everything look a little bit gold. And I think, this is mine. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody can take it back. I built this, and I kept it, and I am standing in it right now. That feeling is better than any amount of family harmony I could have purchased by staying quiet. I hope you know the difference. I hope, if you're carrying a tally of your own, a list of things absorbed and dismissed and called love when they weren't, I hope you know that putting it down is not the same as giving up. Setting a boundary is not an act of anger. It is an act of self-respect, so quiet and so solid that, once you've done it, you will wonder how you ever lived without it. Boundaries cost me something. They cost me the version of my family I used to pretend we were, but they gave me back myself, and that turns out to be a much better deal.